The measure of shadows. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it wasn't the sharp, shooting pain in my chest or the relentless fatigue that had turned my days into a haze. It was the way my wife, Evelyn, had started to drift. She used to hum while making coffee in the morning, a soft, lilting tune that belonged only to her. She used to call me her rock, a playful jab at my stoic nature. But now, the house felt eerily quiet, even when she was there. I chalked it up to my illness. The cancer diagnosis had shaken us both, and I thought perhaps she, like me, was grappling with the magnitude of what lay ahead. The doctors had been clear, stage through. Not the end, but certainly not the beginning. A precarious middle ground that felt like walking a tightrope over a yawning abyss. I had expected fear, perhaps anger, even grief from her, but not distance. As the weeks turned into months, I began noticing the late nights. "Work," she'd say, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The hurried phone calls in another room, the texts she'd shield from view, the faint whiff of a cologne that wasn't mine. It was on a particularly grueling Thursday, after a round of chemotherapy, that left me feeling hollowed out and brittle, that I found the receipt, tucked into the pocket of her coat. It was for a dinner at a restaurant we had never been to together. 2 meals, 2 glasses of wine, dated just 2 nights before. I stared at it for a long time, the paper trembling in my hands. A storm of emotions surged within me: denial, anger, confusion. But above all, there was a crushing sadness. Evelyn, the woman who had vowed to stand by me in sickness and in health, had chosen this moment to slip away. Still, I didn't confront her. Not at first. I wanted to be sure, needed to understand what was happening without the haze of accusation. And so I started paying closer attention, piecing together the fragments of her betrayal. One evening, when she left the house under the guise of meeting a client, I followed her. It felt wrong, like I was betraying her, even as I sought the truth of her betrayal. She drove to a small boutique hotel on the outskirts of town. I watched from the car as a man, tall, well-dressed, unfamiliar, greeted her with a kiss that was far too intimate to be innocent. In that moment, I felt the ground beneath me crumble. It wasn't just her infidelity that cut me to the core. It was the timing. Here I was, facing my mortality, and she had chosen to find solace in someone else's arms. When she returned home that night, I pretended to be asleep, though the ache in my chest was unbearable. The next day, I sat at my desk, staring at the stack of papers my lawyer had prepared months ago. My will. It was straightforward. Everything I owned would go to Evelyn. She was my everything after all, the center of my world. But now? Now, the thought of leaving her everything felt like a cruel joke. I spent hours revising it, carving out a different legacy. I decided to leave the bulk of my estate to charities close to my heart: cancer research, scholarships for underprivileged youth, organizations that could make a difference long after I was gone. For Evelyn, I left enough to be fair but not extravagant. And for the first time in months, as I signed the revised document, I felt a glimmer of control return to my life. When I finally confronted her, I chose my moment carefully. We were sitting at the dinner table, the silence between us thicker than the soup in our bowls. "I know," I said, my voice quiet but steady. She froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth. "Know what?" I met her eyes, and for the first time in months, I saw her fear. About him, about everything. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they didn't fall. She didn't deny it, didn't try to lie. Instead, she whispered, "I'm sorry." I wanted to yell, to demand answers, to make her feel the depth of my pain. But I was too tired for anger. All I could manage was a question. "Why now? Why When I needed you most? Her answer was a whisper, barely audible. I was scared, scared of losing you, scared of being alone, and I made a mistake. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was the one I got. In the months that followed, our lives became a strange dance of coexistence. She stayed, perhaps out of guilt, perhaps out of love. I don't know. But I focused on what little time I had left, pouring my energy into the causes I cared about, making peace with my past, and finding moments of joy where I could and when. The time came when I felt the shadows lengthen and the world grow dim. I found solace in the fact that I had reclaimed my story. Evelyn's betrayal had broken me, but it had also set me free. As I closed my eyes for the last time, I thought not of her, but of the lives I might touch through my final acts of generosity. In the end, that was my legacy. Not the betrayal, not the pain, but the choice to rise above it. The Measure of Shadows continued. Evelyn's confession marked the beginning of a strange, uncharted chapter in our marriage. We didn't speak much in the days after that conversation, each of us retreating into our own private worlds. She spent her nights pacing the halls while I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the memories of our life together, now stained by her infidelity. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to ask her to leave. Maybe it was the cancer, the way it weakened not just my body but my resolve. Or maybe, deep down, I still hoped to understand her. Love, after all, is a stubborn thing, refusing to wither even in the harshest storms. But the silence between us grew heavier, suffocating. So one evening, I decided to break it. Why him? I asked her as we sat on opposite ends of the couch, a chasm of emotional distance between us. She looked at me, startled by the question. For a moment, she said nothing, her eyes darting to the floor. He made me feel alive, she finally admitted, her voice trembling. Alive? I repeated, the word cutting through me like a knife. And I didn't. Her tears came then, hot and heavy. You did, she said. You always did. But when you got sick, everything changed. You pulled away. You didn't want me to see you vulnerable, and I didn't know how to reach you. Her words stung, not because they were entirely untrue, but because they revealed a part of myself I hadn't wanted to acknowledge. I had pulled away. I had tried to shield her from the worst of my illness, thinking I was protecting her when, in reality, I was building a wall between us, but still, I couldn't excuse her actions. So, instead of trying harder, you found someone else? She nodded, her sobs racking her body. I was weak. I was selfish. And I hate myself for it. Over the weeks that followed, I wrestled with the weight of her betrayal and the truth of her words. My anger ebbed and flowed, crashing over me in waves, leaving me gasping for air. There were days when I wanted nothing more than to scream at her, to hurl accusations and venom. And then there were days when I felt nothing at all, numb to everything, even the cancer that was slowly consuming me. Evelyn, for her part, seemed determined to make amends. She stopped seeing him, at least as far as I could tell. She doted on me, caring for me with a tenderness that felt almost suffocating. But no matter what she did, the trust between us had been shattered, and I didn't know if it could ever be rebuilt. One evening, as I sat by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Evelyn approached me with a folder in her hands. "What's this?" I asked, taking it from her. "Everything," she said softly. "Bank statements, emails, texts, proof that it's over. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want you to know that I'm trying. I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust." I opened the folder, scanning its contents. It was all there, evidence of her affair and proof that she had ended it. It was a gesture of transparency, a way of saying she had nothing left to hide. But as I looked at her, standing before me with tears in her eyes and remorse etched into every line of her face, I realized something. Trust wasn't something that could be restored with proof or gestures. It had to be rebuilt slowly, brick by brick, and I didn't know if I had the strength or the time to do that. The next morning, I made a decision. "Evelyn," I said as we sat at the breakfast table, the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. "I'm not sure we can go back to what we were, but I'm willing to try, if you are." She looked at me, her eyes wide with hope and surprise. "I am," she said, her voice firm. "Then we'll take it one day at a time," I said. "But you need to understand that things will never be the same, and if you ever lie to me again, it's over." "I understand," she said, reaching for my hand. For the first time in months, I let her touch linger. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. As the days turned into weeks, we began the painstaking process of rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy. There were fights, moments of doubt, and nights when I wondered if I had made the right choice. But there were also glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with, moments of connection that reminded me why I had chosen to fight for us in the first place. In the end, it wasn't just Evelyn who had to change. It was me, too. I had to learn, to let her in, to share my fears and vulnerabilities, to trust her again, despite the pain she had caused me. And while our journey was far from over, I knew one thing for certain. Life, no matter how fragile or fleeting, was too precious to spend in bitterness and regret. Ah, revenge, a thread as ancient as betrayal itself. Let us continue this tale, venturing into the shadowy depths of a man's heart as he navigates the storm of vengeance, pain, and rediscovery. The measure of shadows, revenge. Evelyn's remorse hung heavy in the air, her every action laced with a desperation to make things right. She cooked my favorite meals, offered tender words, and hovered over me like a penitent guardian. But every smile she gave me felt hollow. Every touch of her hand was a reminder of the one she had given to someone else. Forgiveness was not in my heart. Not then. Not yet. The cancer had already taken so much from me. My health, my energy, my sense of certainty in the future. And Evelyn had taken the rest. My trust, my pride, my belief in us. I felt stripped, bare, a man left with nothing but the ache of betrayal and the bitter resolve to do something about it. That night, as I lay awake in the dark, I devised a plan. Not to scream or rage or beg for answers, but to ensure that Evelyn would feel the sting of what she had done. Not in words, but in actions. The first step was to secure my legacy. I met with my lawyer the following week, under the pretense of updating my will to reflect my illness. What Evelyn didn't know was that I was rewriting the terms entirely. I removed her as the primary beneficiary, leaving her a modest sum that would suffice but never spoil. The rest of my estate, a considerable amount amassed through years of hard work, would go elsewhere. A foundation for cancer research, a scholarship fund for young dreamers, even a local animal shelter I had once donated to in passing. It felt good. Quietly, methodically, I was reclaiming control. But that was just the beginning. The second step required patience. Evelyn's guilt made her an easy target, her every move governed by a desire to appease me. She didn't notice. When I began asking pointed questions about her lover, soft, seemingly innocent inquiries that she answered without hesitation, eager to prove her transparency. Where does he work? What does he drive? What's his name again? Little by little, I pieced together a portrait of the man who had stolen what was mine. His name was Richard, a real estate broker with a taste for luxury and a reputation for charm. He wasn't married, of course not. Men like him rarely were. But he was arrogant, careless in the way he flaunted his successes. It didn't take much to find him online. A few late-night searches and a little digging revealed everything I needed to know. His office, his social media profiles, even the photos of him and Evelyn together at that boutique hotel. My hands shook as I saved them, not with sadness, but with grim anticipation. The final step was execution. I started small. An anonymous email to his firm attaching the hotel photos with a message. "Is this how your top broker spends his evenings? Might be worth reviewing his contracts for any discrepancies." Then came the reviews. I created fake accounts, leaving scathing comments about his professionalism on every platform I could find. One by one, his glowing 5-star ratings began to plummet. But the pièce de résistance required something more personal. I called in a favor from an old friend, Thomas, a private investigator I had helped years ago with a loan he'd never forgotten. Thomas was good, better than good. Within weeks, he uncovered Richard's skeletons, a messy lawsuit he'd settled quietly, a questionable expense report that hinted at tax fraud, and, most delicious of all, a string of flirtations with other women that Evelyn knew nothing about. I printed everything, assembling a neat little dossier that I left on Evelyn's pillow one evening. When she found it, her gasp echoed through the house. What is this?" she stammered, holding the papers in trembling hands. "The man you chose over me," I said, my voice cold. "Thought you deserved to know who he really is." She sank to the bed, tears streaming down her face as she read through the damning evidence. I watched her crumble, the weight of her choices, crashing down on her. It should have felt satisfying, but instead, it left me hollow. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn cut all ties with Richard. She begged for my forgiveness, swore she would spend the rest of her life making it up to me. But by then, I had already made my decision. One evening, as we sat in the living room, I handed her a sealed envelope. "What's this?" she asked, her voice wary. "My goodbye," I said simply. She opened it, her eyes scanning the words. It was a letter outlining my decision to leave her. I had arranged for her to stay in the house until my passing, after which it would be sold and the proceeds donated. She would receive a modest stipend, enough to rebuild her life, but not enough to forget the cost of her actions. "You're leaving me?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "No," I said. "You left me. I'm just making it official." The Measure of Shadows, a new chapter. The day I walked away from Evelyn was the first day I truly felt free. The house, once a symbol of love and companionship, had become a prison of shattered memories. Leaving it, and her, behind was like stepping into fresh air after years in suffocating darkness. But freedom comes with its own weight. The days stretched long and quiet, each one a reminder of the choices I had made. I moved into a modest apartment on the edge of town, trading the sprawling home I'd shared with Evelyn for something smaller, simpler. I filled my days with the few pleasures still within my grasp, reading, walking in the park when my strength allowed, and working on the legacy I wanted to leave behind. The cancer was relentless, of course. It didn't care about my newfound independence or the satisfaction I'd taken from my revenge. Each round of chemotherapy felt like a battle I wasn't sure I wanted to fight, but somewhere, deep within, a spark of defiance remained. An unexpected letter. One rainy afternoon, as I sat by the window watching droplets race down the glass, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I found no one there, just a thick envelope resting on the mat. Inside was a letter, handwritten in a neat, unfamiliar script. "Dear Mr. Hayes, you don't know me, but my name is Alice. I'm Richard's wife." My breath caught as I read those words. Wife? I reread the sentence, then continued. "I recently came across your name and learned of the situation involving My husband and your wife. I thought you should know that you weren't the only one he deceived. Richard has been lying to me for years, and discovering the truth has shattered my world. I wanted to reach out to you, not to dig up more pain, but because I believe we both deserve the full story. If you're willing, I'd like to meet and talk." She had left her number at the bottom of the letter, along with an address for a small cafe in town. I sat there for a long time, the letter trembling in my hands. The meeting curiosity eventually got the better of me. A few days later, I found myself walking into the cafe, the soft hum of conversation and clinking cups filling the air. Alice was easy to spot. She was younger than I had imagined, mid-30s perhaps, with sharp green eyes and an air of quiet determination. She stood when she saw me, extending a hand. "Mr. Hayes?" she asked. "Call me Daniel," I said, shaking her hand. We sat across from each other, the table a fragile barrier between two strangers united by shared pain. Alice wasted no time. "I've spent the last few months unraveling Richard's lies," she began. "He told me he was traveling for work, that his late nights were just part of the job. But when I found the credit card statements, the hotel, receipts, it all fell apart." Her voice faltered, and for a moment I saw the weight of her heartbreak, but she quickly recovered, fixing me with a steady gaze. "When I found out about Evelyn, I wasn't sure what to do. But then I found your name. I just needed to know how someone else survived this." I told her my story. Not everything, but enough. Her expression shifted as I spoke, a mixture of sympathy and something else. Admiration, perhaps? "You handled it better than I did," she said with a bitter laugh. "I threw him out the moment I confronted him. He begged of course, promised he'd change, but I knew better." For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to camaraderie. We talked for hours, trading stories of betrayal and resilience. By the time we left the cafe, exchanging numbers and a promise to stay in touch, I felt lighter. A spark in the darkness. Alice and I began meeting regularly, not out of romantic interest, but because we understood each other in a way few others could. She had been betrayed, humiliated, and yet she had emerged stronger, determined to rebuild her life. I found her strength inspiring. Over time, our conversations began to shift. We talked less about Richard and Evelyn and more about ourselves, our dreams, our fears, our plans for the future. Alice was an artist, her work a vivid reflection of her emotions. I began attending her gallery openings, finding solace in the vibrant colors and bold strokes of her paintings. One evening, after a particularly moving exhibition, she asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Daniel," she said, her green eyes searching mine, "do you ever think about what comes next? Not just with your health, but your life?" I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. "I guess I've been so focused on the end that I haven't thought much about what comes after," I admitted. She smiled, a hint of mischief in her expression. "Maybe it's time you did." A new purpose. Alice's words stayed with me, lingering in the back of my mind like a gentle nudge. With her encouragement, I began to focus on living rather than just surviving. The measure of shadows. Epilogue, ripples of the past. Daniel Hayes passed away quietly on a rainy afternoon, the world outside his hospice window blurred by the soft drizzle. Alice sat beside him, holding his hand, her heart heavy with grief, but full of gratitude for the time they had shared. His funeral was a modest affair, attended by a small circle of those whose lives he had touched. Evelyn was there, standing apart from the crowd, her face pale and drawn. She had been informed of his passing but hadn't expected to be included in the service. To her surprise, Alice had extended an invitation. "He loved you once," Alice had said when they spoke briefly over the phone, "and whatever happened between you, he would want you to say goodbye." Evelyn had cried then, overcome by guilt and the weight of everything she had lost. For the reading of the will. A week later, the attendees gathered in a small office for the reading of Daniel's will. Evelyn sat quietly in the back, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Alice was there too, seated near the front, her expression calm but somber. The lawyer began reading, his voice steady as he outlined Daniel's wishes. The bulk of his estate had been donated to charity, as Evelyn had already suspected. But when the lawyer turned to her, she was startled to hear her name. To Evelyn Hayes, I leave the following: the house where we built our life together. Though it became a place of pain for me, I hope it will serve as a reminder of the love we once shared. Use it to start over, or let it go and build something new. Evelyn's breath hitched as the lawyer continued. To Alice, I leave the journals I kept during the last year of my life. You showed me how to find joy in the face of adversity, and these pages hold the truths I couldn't always express out loud. May they bring you peace. When the lawyer finished, there was silence. Evelyn didn't know what to say. She had expected anger, resentment, perhaps even an omission, but instead, Daniel had left her a chance, a way to rebuild, if only she could muster the courage. Evelyn's journey. In the months that followed, Evelyn returned to the house. It felt strange at first, walking through the empty rooms, haunted by memories of laughter, arguments, and the silence that had come to define their final days together. But she couldn't ignore the gift Daniel had given her. Slowly, she began to make changes, painting the walls, replacing old furniture, and planting a garden in the backyard. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about creating something new, something that honored the man she had loved and betrayed. She also began attending therapy, confronting the choices that had led to her affair and the pain she had caused. It was a painful process, but it was necessary. Over time, she learned to forgive herself, not entirely, but enough to move forward. One day, while sorting through an old box of Daniel's belongings, she found a letter addressed to her. Evelyn, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I hope you understand why I made the decisions I did. You hurt me in ways I never thought possible, but I also know that I wasn't blameless. I pulled away when I should have held you closer. I let my pride and fear drive a wedge between us, and for that, I am sorry. You have a chance now to start over. Don't waste it. Be the person I fell in love with, the person who inspired me, challenged me, and made me laugh. And please, forgive yourself. Life is too short for anything else. Daniel Evelyn wept as she read his words, clutching the letter to her chest. She didn't know if she deserved his forgiveness, but she vowed to honor his wish. Alice's discovery. Alice, meanwhile, immersed herself in the journals Daniel had left her. Page after page, she uncovered his thoughts, fears, and reflections during his final year. One entry in particular stood out. Meeting Alice was like finding light in a tunnel I thought would never end. She reminded me that even in the face of betrayal and illness, there is still beauty in the world. I don't know how much time I have left, but I want to spend it creating something meaningful, with her, and for myself. The journals became a source of inspiration for Alice. She used them as the foundation for a new art series, each painting a visual representation of Daniel's words. The collection, titled Echoes of Resilience, was met with critical acclaim, drawing attention not just to her talent, but to the causes Daniel had championed. Part of the proceeds from the exhibition went to the Cancer Research Foundation he had supported, ensuring that his legacy continued to grow. Legacy and redemption years passed, and the wounds left by betrayal and loss began to heal. Evelyn eventually sold the house, using the proceeds to travel and volunteer with organizations supporting cancer patients and their families. The measure of shadows. The ripple widens. 5 years later. The quiet morning sun rose over the garden Evelyn had planted, spilling light over blooming lilies and roses that swayed gently in the breeze. It had been 5 years since Daniel's passing, and Evelyn had rebuilt her life in ways she never thought possible. The house, now sold, had been the foundation of her healing, but Evelyn had moved into a smaller, cozy home in the countryside. She had found solace in volunteering at a hospice for terminally ill patients, inspired by her time with Daniel, helping others navigate the most vulnerable chapters of their lives, gave her a sense of purpose, a way to atone for the pain she had caused. Evelyn had also become a mentor in a support group for individuals navigating infidelity, both those who had been betrayed and those who had betrayed others. She often shared her story, not to absolve herself, but to show that redemption, though hard-earned, was possible. On this particular morning, Evelyn sat down with her coffee and opened an envelope that had arrived the day before. Inside was an invitation, an art exhibition in the city, featuring the work of none other than Alice. The title of the exhibition caught her breath. Shadows of Light, a journey through loss and forgiveness. For a moment, Evelyn hesitated. She hadn't seen Alice since Daniel's funeral, but something in her heart urged her to go. Alice's exhibition. The gallery was alive with murmured conversations and the soft hum of classical music. Evelyn stepped. Inside, her eyes immediately drawn to the vivid, emotional paintings that lined the walls. Each piece seemed to tell a story, a battle with grief, a moment of hope, a triumph over despair. Alice stood near the center of the room, speaking with a group of attendees. When she saw Evelyn, her expression shifted. Surprise, then warmth. She excused herself and approached with a tentative smile. "I didn't expect to see you here," Alice said. Evelyn nodded, her voice soft. "I wasn't sure if I should come, but I wanted to. Your work is beautiful." Alice gestured toward one of the largest paintings in the room, a vibrant piece of swirling blues and golds. "That one was inspired by Daniel," she said. "It's called The Spark of Defiance. He had this way of finding strength even in the darkest moments. I wanted to honor that." The two women stood in silence looking at the painting. Then Alice turned to Evelyn. "How have you been?" she asked gently. Evelyn hesitated, then answered truthfully. "Better. Not perfect, but better. I've tried to live in a way that would make him proud." Alice smiled, a genuine warmth in her expression. "I think he'd be glad to hear that." A new connection. The conversation that began in the gallery didn't end there. Over the following weeks, Alice and Evelyn began meeting occasionally for coffee, their relationship shifting from cautious acquaintanceship to something resembling friendship. They shared stories about Daniel, his quirks, his wisdom, his capacity for forgiveness. Through their conversations, they found healing in unexpected ways. Alice helped Evelyn see that she wasn't defined solely by her mistakes, while Evelyn reminded Alice of the profound impact Daniel had on those around him. One day, as they walked through a park near the gallery, Alice brought up an idea. Daniel wanted to create something lasting, she said. Not just with his will, but with his life. What if we worked together to make that happen? Evelyn raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? A foundation, Alice explained. We could start a nonprofit in his name, something that supports cancer patients, helps with counseling for families, or funds research. You and I both know how much he cared about those things. Evelyn was silent for a moment, her mind turning over the possibilities. Then she nodded. I think he would have loved that. The Hayes Foundation. Over the next year, the Hayes Foundation for Healing and Hope was born. Combining Alice's artistic talents and network with Evelyn's organizational skills, the foundation quickly gained traction. They hosted charity art auctions, provided grants for cancer patients and their families, and even started a scholarship program for students, pursuing careers in oncology and social work. The foundation became a beacon of light for countless individuals, a testament to Daniel's legacy and the power of transformation. Ripples beyond reach. As the foundation grew, its impact spread further than either woman had imagined. One day, Evelyn received a letter from a young man named Jonah. "Dear Ms. Hayes, my name is Jonah, and I'm writing to thank you. I was one of the first recipients of the Hayes Scholarship, and it changed my life. My father passed away from cancer when I was a teenager, and I always wanted to become an oncologist to help families like mine. The measure of shadows. The legacy expands." A sudden test. The Hayes Foundation had grown to become a beacon of hope for countless individuals. Its annual galas drew national attention, and its programs had touched the lives of thousands. Yet, as with any great endeavor, challenges were inevitable. One evening, as Alice was preparing for a new art exhibit to raise funds for the foundation, Evelyn arrived at her studio, visibly distressed. She carried a stack of papers in her hands, her expression pale and tense. "Alice," Evelyn began, her voice trembling, "we have a problem." Alice set down her paintbrush and gestured for Evelyn to sit. "What's wrong?" Evelyn handed over the papers, legal documents, and a letter from a corporate lawyer. "It's Richard. He's trying to sue the foundation." Alice's eyes widened as she scanned the documents. Richard, Evelyn's former lover, and the man who had played a role in Daniel's heartbreak, was claiming that a portion of Daniel's estate had been misappropriated when it was transferred into the foundation. His argument was flimsy, but it was enough to potentially tarnish the foundation's reputation if the case went public. "What does he want?" Alice asked, her voice steady despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. "Money," Evelyn replied bitterly. "He says he's entitled to a share because of his involvement in Daniel's business dealings before the will was rewritten. It's absurd, but—" Her voice trailed off, and she looked away, ashamed. "I can't help but feel like this is somehow my fault." Alice placed a hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "This isn't your fault. Richard's greed has nothing to do with you. We'll fight this." The battle in the courts. The legal battle. That followed was grueling. Richard's lawyers attempted to paint the foundation as an organization built on mismanagement and questionable practices, hoping to pressure Alice and Evelyn into settling. But they underestimated the two women's resolve. Alice and Evelyn worked tirelessly alongside their legal team to defend the foundation. They provided meticulous records of every financial transaction, countered every baseless accusation, and rallied public support. Survivors and families who had benefited from the foundation came forward, sharing their stories and praising the organization's impact. The court case dragged on for months, taking a toll on both women. Evelyn, in particular, struggled with the resurfacing guilt and shame that Richard's involvement triggered. But Alice remained steadfast, reminding her that the fight wasn't just about them, it was about the countless lives the foundation had saved and supported. In the end, the court ruled in favor of the Hayes Foundation, dismissing Richard's claims as unfounded. The victory was bittersweet, but it strengthened Alice and Evelyn's bond and reinforced their commitment to Daniel's legacy. A new vision. The legal battle prompted Alice and Evelyn to reevaluate the foundation's mission. They realized that while they had achieved much, there was still so much more they could do. Together, they launched a new initiative, the Hayes Resilience Center, a state-of-the-art facility offering holistic support for cancer patients and their families. The center provided not only medical care but also counseling, art therapy, and financial assistance. Alice spearheaded the art therapy program, using her experience to help patients express their emotions and find solace in creativity. Evelyn took charge of the counseling services, drawing on her own journey of redemption to guide others through their struggles. The opening of the Hayes Resilience Center was a turning point for the foundation. It became a symbol of hope and healing, a place where people could find strength in the face of adversity. Evelyn's unexpected redemption. One afternoon, as Evelyn was leaving the center, she was approached by a woman in her early 30s. The woman hesitated before speaking, her voice nervous but determined. "Mrs. Hayes?" she asked. Evelyn turned, offering a polite smile. "Yes?" My name is Clara," the woman said. "I'm Richard's daughter." Evelyn froze, her heart pounding. She had never met Richard's children, though she knew of them. Clara's expression was unreadable, a mix of apprehension and curiosity. "I've been following the Foundation's work," Clara continued, "and I just wanted to say thank you. My father may not have been a good man, but seeing what you've done here, what you've built, it's inspiring. I wanted you to know that." Evelyn was stunned. She hadn't expected kindness from anyone connected to Richard. For a moment, she struggled to find the right words. "Thank you," she finally said. "That means more than you know." Clara smiled faintly. "I think my dad was angry because he saw in you and Daniel everything he could never be. He couldn't handle that, so he tried to tear it down. But you didn't let him. You rose above it." The measure of shadows. Final reflection. Daniel's story had begun with betrayal and despair, but it ended with a legacy that transformed lives. Through his choices, he had turned pain into purpose, inspiring others to do the same. His shadow, far from being a source of darkness, became a guiding light, a measure of resilience, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love. Would you like to explore further, or does this feel like a fitting conclusion to their journey? Vi skazali, continue the story. Programa ChatGPT skazala. ChatGPT, The Measure of Shadows, A Legacy Reborn. A Letter Unearthed. Several years after the Hayes Foundation had reached international acclaim, Evelyn was sorting through old belongings when she stumbled upon a box she had almost forgotten existed. Inside were mementos from her life with Daniel, photos, anniversary cards, and tucked among them, an envelope she didn't recognize. The envelope was addressed to Evelyn in Daniel's handwriting, but it didn't match the letter he'd left for her in his will. Her hands trembled as she opened it, unsure of what she might find. The letter began simply, "Evelyn, if you're reading this, then I didn't get to say everything I wanted to in person. I wrote this on a day when I felt hope and pain in equal measure. I've struggled to understand why you did what you did. But in my heart, I still love you. Love like ours doesn't just disappear, even when it's tested. I hope you found a way to forgive yourself, because I know I forgave you long ago." Evelyn's breath caught. Daniel had written this before his diagnosis worsened, before his final months became consumed by preparations for the end. The letter continued. "I don't want my memory to weigh you down. If I've learned anything, it's that life is too short to carry burdens that don't serve us. Promise me you'll let yourself find joy again. Promise me you'll live." Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the letter to her chest. She realized that even in his pain, Daniel had wanted her to heal. This new discovery brought a sense of closure she hadn't realized she needed. A journey to the unknown. Spurred by Daniel's words, Evelyn decided it was time to step outside the shadow of her guilt entirely. She took a sabbatical from her role at the Foundation and embarked on a journey of self-discovery, traveling to places she and Daniel had once dreamed of visiting together. In Italy, she stood before the grandeur of Florence's Duomo, imagining how Daniel might have sketched its intricate details in his notebook. In Japan, she wandered through Kyoto's bamboo forest, feeling a deep, serene connection to the world around her. And in Tanzania, she found herself at the edge of the Serengeti at sunrise, watching the golden light spill across the plains. It was there, under the vast, endless sky that she finally felt the weight of her past lift. Alice's new beginning. While Evelyn was on her journey, Alice faced her own crossroads. After years of dedicating herself to the foundation, she began to feel a pull toward something different. One evening, as she was sketching ideas for a new art series, she realized she wanted to teach. She wanted to share her knowledge and passion with the next generation of artists, inspiring them to use their creativity as a means of healing and storytelling. Alice applied for a position at a prestigious art school and was soon offered a role as a visiting professor. Balancing her teaching responsibilities with her work at the foundation proved challenging at first, but she found immense joy in mentoring her students. Her classes became a safe haven for young artists, many of whom carried their own stories of pain and resilience. Through her guidance, they learned to channel their emotions into their art, creating pieces that resonated deeply with audiences. The unexpected reunion. 2 years after Evelyn had left on her journey, she returned home feeling renewed and ready to continue her work. She and Alice met for lunch at a small cafe, their reunion marked by laughter and shared stories of their time apart. "I hear you've been inspiring a whole new generation," Evelyn teased, sipping her coffee. Alice smiled. "And I hear you've been living out all the adventures Daniel used to talk about." Evelyn nodded, her expression softening. "I found a letter he wrote to me, one I hadn't seen before. It gave me the courage to finally let go of the guilt I was holding on to. He wanted me to live, so I did." Alice reached across the table and took Evelyn's hand. "He'd be proud of you, of both of us." The Hayes Global Summit. As their personal lives evolved, so did the Hayes Foundation. A decade after the opening of the Resilience Center, Alice and Evelyn co-hosted the first Hayes Global Summit for Healing and Innovation. The summit brought together world leaders, researchers, artists, and survivors to share ideas and celebrate progress in the fight against cancer. The Measure of Shadows, Echoes of the Past. A visitor from the unseen. Months after the Hayes Global Summit, life began to settle into a rhythm for both Alice and Evelyn. The foundation was thriving, their personal paths were fulfilling, and the Hayes Resilience Center had become a cornerstone of hope worldwide. One chilly autumn afternoon, as Evelyn was sorting through donor applications at the foundation office, the receptionist buzzed her. "Ms. Hayes," came the receptionist's voice, tinged with hesitation. "There's someone here asking for you. He says his name is Nicholas Hayes." Evelyn froze. Nicholas Hayes. The name tugged at something buried deep in her memory. "Send him in," she said, her voice calm but her heart racing. A tall, older man entered the room, his resemblance to Daniel so uncanny that Evelyn momentarily forgot how to breathe. His piercing blue eyes scanned the room, settling on her with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced," he began, his voice steady yet cautious. "I believe we're family." The lost Hayes Evelyn gestured for him to sit, her mind racing. Over coffee, Nicholas explained his story. He was Daniel's estranged cousin, the son of Daniel's father's brother. The family had been torn apart decades ago over bitter financial disputes. Nicholas had grown up hearing only fragments about Daniel, whispers of his success and brilliance, but nothing substantial. "I didn't even know he had passed until a few months ago," Nicholas said, his voice tinged with regret. "I found out through an old family contact, and then I discovered the foundation. I had to see it for myself." Evelyn listened intently, her emotions a whirlwind of surprise, curiosity, and protectiveness over Daniel's legacy. "Why now?" she asked gently. "After all this time?" Nicholas hesitated before answering. "Because I've spent too many years running from my past. And when I saw what you've built, I realized it was time to face it. Daniel clearly left behind something extraordinary, and I want to be part of it, if you'll allow me." Skepticism. and trust Evelyn shared the encounter with Alice later that evening. While Evelyn was inclined to give Nicholas a chance, Alice was more skeptical. "Evelyn, we've both seen what greed can do," Alice warned. "What if he's here for the buy? Wrong reasons? We can't let him jeopardize everything we've worked for?" Evelyn nodded, understanding Alice's concerns. "I know. But what if he's genuine? Daniel believed in second chances, and I think we owe it to him to at least find out." After some discussion, they decided to proceed cautiously. Nicholas would be given a chance to volunteer with the Foundation, allowing them to observe his intentions and character. Proving his worth. To everyone's surprise, Nicholas threw himself into the work with genuine enthusiasm. He joined outreach programs, helped organize events, and even contributed from his own wealth to expand the Resilience Center's facilities. His actions spoke louder than words, gradually winning over even Alice's guarded heart. One evening, as the three of them shared dinner after a long day, Nicholas opened up about his regrets. "I spent so much of my life angry," he admitted. "Angry at my father, at the world, and at myself. I thought I was owed something, and I let that entitlement poison my relationships. But seeing what you've done here, it's humbled me. This foundation, this legacy, it's everything I should have aspired to be." Evelyn reached across the table, placing a hand on his. "It's never too late to change, Nicholas. Daniel taught us that, unraveling another mystery." As Nicholas became a trusted member of the Foundation's inner circle, he shared an intriguing piece of information. During his youth, his father had mentioned a secret investment Daniel had made. It was something Daniel believed in passionately, Nicholas explained. "But my father dismissed it as foolish. He always said Daniel was too idealistic for his own good." Intrigued, Evelyn and Alice began digging into the Foundation's archives and Daniel's old financial records. What they found shocked them. Years before his diagnosis, Daniel had invested a significant sum into a groundbreaking medical research project, one focused on developing early cancer detection technology. The project had stalled due to lack of funding after Daniel's passing, but the early results were promising. "This could change everything," Alice said, her eyes shining with determination. "If we revive this project, we could save even more lives." Reviving the dream. With renewed purpose, the Foundation launched a campaign to resurrect Daniel's forgotten project. They named it the Hayes Vision Initiative, a tribute to Daniel's foresight and belief in innovation. The initiative quickly gained traction, attracting top scientists and researchers from around the world. The Measure of Shadows, the next chapter. The unexpected message. 1. Quiet morning, as Evelyn was reviewing the Foundation's plans for expanding into underserved regions, an email landed in her inbox. Its subject line read, "A truth long hidden, from someone who knows." Curious and slightly unsettled, Evelyn opened it. The message was brief, but striking. "Ms. Hayes, I've followed the incredible work you and your team have done for years. But there's something about Daniel's past that you deserve to know. If you're willing to meet, I can explain everything. You may find it changes how you see his story, and yours. Please contact me if you're open to learning the truth." There was no name, only a phone number. Evelyn's heart raced. Could this be a scam? Or was it a genuine thread to some piece of Daniel's life she had never uncovered? She forwarded the email to Alice and Nicholas, asking for their opinions. The decision to dig deeper over lunch that afternoon, the trio discussed the mysterious message. "It could be nothing," Alice said, her brow furrowed. "But it could also be dangerous. People know what Daniel meant to the Foundation and to the world. They could be trying to manipulate you." Nicholas, however, took a different stance. "It might be risky, but if there's any truth to this, don't you want to know? Daniel wasn't perfect. Maybe this is a chance to understand him even better. Evelyn sat quietly, weighing their perspectives. Finally, she said, I'll meet them, but not alone. Nicholas, would you come with me? He nodded. Of course. The meeting. The meeting took place in a small, nondescript cafe on the outskirts of town. Evelyn and Nicholas arrived early, scanning the room for any sign of the mysterious sender. A woman in her mid-50s approached their table, her face lined with age but her eyes sharp and observant. She introduced herself as Margaret. I appreciate you coming, Margaret said, her voice steady but tinged with nervousness. This isn't easy for me to share, but I think it's important. Margaret explained that she had worked as a private nurse many years ago, specializing in palliative care for cancer patients. One of her former patients, a man named Victor Hayes, had once confided in her about a rift within the Hayes family. Victor was Daniel's uncle, Margaret said, her gaze steady, and he carried secrets he never shared publicly, secrets about why the family truly fell apart. A shocking revelation. Margaret revealed that Victor had been the original source of funding for Daniel's early career. However, when Daniel learned that Victor's wealth had been amassed through unethical business practices, including exploiting vulnerable communities, he confronted his uncle. Victor begged Daniel to stay quiet, but Daniel refused. Margaret continued. He cut ties with Victor completely and used his influence to expose some of the shady dealings, though he never publicly connected them to his own family. It was a turning point in his life, one that drove him to build something entirely separate from the Hayes name. Nicholas sat back, stunned. That's why my father was so bitter, he muttered. He always said Daniel thought he was better than the rest of us. Evelyn, meanwhile, felt a rush of emotions. Admiration for Daniel's principles, sorrow for the turmoil he must have endured, and anger that these truths had been buried for so long. Why are you telling me this now? Evelyn asked. Margaret hesitated before replying. Because Daniel's story is a testament to integrity, and because I believe he would want the full truth to be part of his legacy, not just the polished version. A choice to make. After the meeting, Evelyn and Nicholas returned to the foundation to process what they had learned. We can't ignore this, Evelyn said. It's part of who Daniel was, but how do we share it without overshadowing everything he stood for? Alice joined the discussion, offering a measured perspective. What if we include it as part of the Foundation's narrative? We could create a documentary or a written account that explores Daniel's journey, the good, the bad, and the complicated. It would show people that even the greatest legacies are built through struggle. Nicholas nodded. It could also serve as a cautionary tale about ethics in leadership. We could turn it into a teaching moment. Evelyn agreed. Let's do it, but we'll handle it carefully. This isn't about exposing scandal, it's about honoring Daniel's courage to do what was right, even when it came at a personal cost. The documentary, the Foundation partnered with a renowned filmmaker to create a documentary titled Unbroken Threads, The True Story of Daniel Hayes. The film traced Daniel's life from his humble beginnings to his rise as a celebrated architect and philanthropist, weaving in the newly uncovered details about his family's past. Interviews with those who knew Daniel best, friends, colleagues, the measure of shadows, a new legacy, a meeting with the past. A few months after the documentary Unbroken Threads premiered and became a global sensation, Evelyn received a letter, an invitation to meet someone who had reached out after the film's release. The letter was from an elderly woman named Grace Waller, claiming to have known Daniel in the years before his rise to fame. Grace's message was succinct but compelling. I have something of great importance to share with you. It concerns Daniel's early years before the world knew him. Please contact me if you're open to learning something that might change everything. Evelyn's first instinct was to be cautious. She had dealt with enough surprises and revelations to know the dangers of unverified claims. Yet, The letter had a ring of truth, a sense of urgency that made her pause. She turned to Alice and Nicholas for advice. After a brief conversation, they agreed to accompany her to meet Grace at a quiet, secluded house on the outskirts of the city. Grace Waller's confession. When they arrived, Grace Waller was waiting for them, her frame small but dignified. Her silver hair was neatly pulled back, and her eyes held a spark of intensity. She invited them into her home, a place brimming with old photographs and keepsakes. "I was once a friend of Daniel's," Grace began, her voice carrying the weight of untold history. "Not in the way you think, though. I met him when he was a young man just starting his career. He was idealistic, passionate, and driven. But he wasn't just focused on his work. He was focused on something else entirely." Evelyn leaned forward, her heart racing with curiosity. "What do you mean?" Grace smiled sadly, almost wistfully. "Before Daniel's family cut him off, he had another ambition, one that no one knew about. He planned to start a school for young artists, to give them the same opportunities he had. But he also wanted to offer them a sanctuary, a place to heal, to learn without the pressure of the world's expectations." Evelyn blinked in surprise. "A school? But we've never heard of anything like that." "Because it never came to fruition," Grace replied. "Daniel was always ahead of his time, but his idealism cost him. The idea was too radical and he couldn't secure the funding needed. But I remember the day he told me about it. He had such hope in his eyes." Grace paused, allowing the weight of her words to sink in. "You see, Daniel was not just a philanthropist. He was a visionary. The world only saw one side of him, the one that rose from nothing to achieve greatness. But there was more to his story, more to his heart than anyone ever realized. The unfulfilled dream." Grace's revelation hit Evelyn hard. She had known Daniel as a man of conviction, but she had never realized the depth of his dreams outside of what he had shared publicly. A school for young artists, an idea so closely aligned with the values the foundation now championed. Evelyn could feel the weight of his unfulfilled dream pressing down on her. It was as if Daniel's legacy had always been incomplete, as though there was one final piece missing, a piece that only she could bring to life. "We have to finish what he started," Evelyn said, her voice filled with newfound determination. "The foundation's work has been incredible, but this is something we need to bring to fruition." Alice, who had been quietly listening, turned to her. "You're talking about opening a school? A place to nurture creativity, healing, and innovation?" Evelyn nodded. "Yes, it's the next step in Daniel's legacy. It's not just about helping the sick or the disadvantaged. It's about empowering the next generation of creators. Daniel believed in education, in fostering the kind of growth that changes the world. The vision comes to life. The decision to create the Hayes School for Creative Arts was made quickly, though the logistics of it all took time. Evelyn, Alice, and Nicholas began raising funds and securing support from prominent figures in the art world. It was an ambitious project, one that required an immense amount of effort and passion. But the vision was clear. They would create a school that would provide scholarships to young artists from all walks of life, offering them not just technical training, but also a space to heal from trauma, to learn the power of storytelling through art, and to develop their voices. The school would stand as a symbol of Daniel's belief that true creativity came from a place of personal growth, and that the arts had the power to heal, inspire, and transform. Opening day. Several years later, the doors of the Hayes School for Creative Arts opened to a crowd of eager students, faculty, and supporters. The building was a stunning architectural masterpiece, one that combined beauty and functionality, just as Daniel would have wanted. At the grand opening ceremony, Evelyn stood before a crowd of students. The measure of shadows, echoes of a legacy. A new beginning. Years had passed since the opening of the Hayes School for Creative Arts, and Evelyn, now an older woman with silver strands gracing her once dark hair, stood at the helm of not just a foundation, but a global movement. The school had grown beyond her wildest dreams, its students and alumni making waves in various industries, and its influence spreading across the world. But despite all the success, there was a new ache in Evelyn's heart, a restlessness that had slowly been growing over time. Her role at the school had transformed from visionary to administrator, and while she was proud of what they had accomplished, there was a part of her that felt distant from the work she had once so passionately led. One evening, as the last, students filed out of the school's halls after a late art showing, Evelyn sat in her office staring at the glowing photos of the school's early days. She thought about Daniel and how much he had believed in the future, how much he would have wanted the school to thrive. But there was something else, something more. The foundation had grown to unimaginable heights, but it had become an entity all on its own. A part of her felt disconnected from it all. "I've been thinking about a new chapter," she said aloud to herself, the words carrying a weight that had been building for some time. She had always embraced change, but this felt like a significant shift. A visit from the past. The following week, as Evelyn was preparing for a meeting with the Foundation's board members, her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but the voice on the other end sent a chill down her spine. "Evelyn Hayes?" The voice was low, calm, yet carried an unsettling authority. "Yes, who is this?" Evelyn replied, her senses alert. "My name is Agent William Cross. I represent a special investigative unit. I'm afraid I have some information about your late husband that you may not be aware of. It's crucial that you meet with me." Evelyn felt her heart skip. It had been years since she had uncovered the deeper layers of Daniel's life, but something in the agent's tone made her feel that this was a different kind of revelation altogether. "I'll meet you," she replied, her voice steady despite the rising unease, the truth unveiled. The meeting took place at a secluded location on the edge of town, an old building that felt distant from the world Evelyn had created. Agent Cross, a middle-aged man with dark circles beneath his eyes, sat across from her, his expression grave. "I'm sorry to bring you here under these circumstances," Agent Cross said, his voice tight with urgency. "But the truth is, your husband, Daniel, was involved in something much bigger than anyone realized. It's something that's been hidden for years, a hidden trust, a series of investments that were linked to an international network of leaders and influencers. We've been tracing it for some time." Evelyn felt a cold wave wash over her. "What are you talking about?" Agent Cross slid a folder across the table toward her. Inside were a series of documents, contracts, and financial statements. "Daniel didn't just build the foundation. He was funding something else, a network of wealthy individuals with interests in art, culture, and, more disturbingly, the shadow economy. We're talking about corruption, organized crime, and even things far darker." Evelyn's pulse quickened. "That's impossible. Daniel would never—" "I understand how this may sound," Agent Cross interjected, "but the evidence is irrefutable. Your husband was both a philanthropist and a figure caught up in a web of deceit that goes deeper than you can imagine. These people have been operating under the radar for years." Evelyn stared at the papers, her mind reeling. She had believed. She knew Daniel's every secret. But this was beyond anything she could have prepared for. A web of lies. As the weeks passed, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that the foundation she had built and the life she had worked so hard to protect was crumbling beneath her. She combed through the documents with Alice and Nicholas, her closest confidants, trying to make sense of it all. "This doesn't make sense," Alice said, her face pale. "Daniel was never involved in anything like this. He was too good for that. He believed in changing the world through his art, not through corruption." Nicholas was equally disturbed, his brow furrowed in deep thought. "We have to confront this, Evelyn. If these people were connected to Daniel, it means everything we've built could be in danger." The Foundation's reputation? Evelyn clenched her fists, a deep resolve settling within her. No, the Foundation is not just Daniel's, it's ours. It's my life's work now. If these people thought they could control him, they're wrong. And if they think they can destroy what he created, they're wrong again. The Measure of Shadows, the final chapter. A new purpose. After the collapse of the Shadow Network and the restoration of the Hayes Foundation's reputation, Evelyn was more than just a woman at the helm of an organization. She had become a symbol of perseverance and truth. Yet, in the quiet moments of reflection, a new question began to take root in her heart. Had the battle for Daniel's legacy and the revelation of his hidden past truly allowed her to heal? The Foundation was stronger than ever, its programs flourishing across the globe. The Hayes School for Creative Arts had become a sanctuary. For young creatives, its halls a testament to Daniel's enduring vision. But as Evelyn looked at the faces of the students, their youthful energy and aspirations, she realized that something was still missing in her own heart. The chaos had been replaced with order, but the void remained. She needed to find a way to honor Daniel's full story, not just the parts of it that were polished and celebrated, but the raw, unspoken truth of his life, his flaws, and his triumphs. A letter from the past. One day, as Evelyn sat in her office reflecting on this, an unexpected package arrived. It was a small, leather-bound journal, worn with age, and sealed with a ribbon she hadn't seen in years. It had no return address, but the handwriting on the front was unmistakable. Daniel's. Her breath caught as she opened the journal, flipping through the delicate pages. Each entry was a piece of his soul laid bare, the thoughts he had never shared with anyone, his doubts about his past, his fears for the future, and the passion that had driven him to create the Foundation. It was raw, unfiltered, and intimate. And then she found it. In one of the final entries, Daniel wrote about the decision to start the school, his dreams for the future, and a strange sense of guilt that had haunted him. He had written, "I know what I'm building is important, but sometimes I wonder if I'm running from something I'm too scared to confront. The truth of who I was, the man I tried to leave behind. Can I truly escape my past, or am I forever bound to it?" Evelyn closed the journal, feeling tears well up in her eyes. She had always known Daniel as the man who rose above his family's legacy, but she had never fully understood the depth of his internal struggle. He had carried burdens she could never have imagined, all while trying to build something meaningful for the world. A quiet decision. That evening, Evelyn stood in front of the school's main entrance, the same place where Daniel had once envisioned a future. The soft glow of the evening light reflected off the windows, and she could almost hear his voice in the wind, as if he were speaking to her across time. She had made a decision. She would not just honor Daniel's legacy through the Foundation or the school. She would honor it through the story, the full, unfiltered story of his life. Evelyn called a meeting with Alice and Nicholas. She shared her plans to publish a memoir, one that would document the truth of Daniel's life, the mistakes he had made, the battles he had fought, and the legacy that had ultimately been created through his vision. "This won't be easy," Evelyn said, her voice firm yet filled with emotion. "But we can't keep hiding behind the polished version of Daniel's story. We need to show the world that greatness doesn't come from perfection. It comes from the ability to rise after falling, to learn from mistakes, and to keep going no matter how hard it gets." Alice nodded in agreement. "The truth will give people something even more valuable than inspiration. It will give them hope. Hope that even in our darkest moments, we can find a way to create something beautiful." Nicholas added, "Daniel's story isn't just his. It's ours. It's the story of all of us who are still trying to make sense of our own shadows." The memoir, Unbroken Threads, Rewritten. Months later, the memoir, titled Unbroken Threads, The Real Legacy of Daniel Hayes was published to critical acclaim. The book took readers on a journey through Daniel's life, starting with his humble beginnings, his meteoric rise to fame, and the complex truths behind his philanthropic empire. It revealed his internal battles, the guilt he carried over the secrets of his past, and his eventual attempt to leave it all behind to build something pure. The memoir was raw, honest, and unflinchingly human. It painted a portrait of Daniel, not as a perfect man, but as someone who struggled, fought, and ultimately found redemption through his work and his commitment to the world. In the final chapters, Evelyn shared her own reflections on his legacy, how she had learned to carry his vision forward while acknowledging the darker parts of his story. She wrote, "We are all defined by the choices we make, but we are also shaped by the circumstances we face." Daniel's life was not a fairy tale, nor was it a tragedy.